Guys, they did it. They finally done it. After 4.5 years of waiting, ever since version 1.0, ever since the first version of the fucking game, we all had a dream, a hope, and they finally listened to community and gave us what we always wanted. They finally given us a 4-star version of Xianling, guys. Yep, just what we wanted. So Mauvika's kit was out for a little while now, and let me tell you, he's everything that we never wanted from her. Now listen, everybody, all of us are tired of playing Xianling and Bennett, and for the longest time we all wanted a character to replace them. Especially for the past year, I would say. Everyone was hoping for the day that Pyro Archon Mauvika comes out and replaces them, or at the very least replaces one of them. And Xianling was the main one. Everybody expected Mauvika to power creep, and you know how they designed Mauvika? He's basically Pyro Raiden Shogun. He's the main DPS with a worse Pyro application than Xianling. Now, on the other hand, we also had Pyro Traveler, which they didn't release Pyro Traveler with Natlan. For the past 3 versions, they've been hiding Pyro Traveler along with Mauvika, hyping it up. So people were speculating that maybe Pyro Traveler is the one that replaces Bennett. After all, they've been building it up for the past 3 versions, hyping it up, giving everyone some hope. So, Pyro Traveler, as we all expected, is also the 4-star versions of Bennett now. They just completely missed the mark with Mauvika and PMC Kid. Now, Mauvika being a DPS is actually not a bad thing because she actually deals really good damage. Something like her would be really good to have, maybe back in like Sumeru or early Fontaine patch, because back then Niv units, especially Niv DPS units, would actually last for at least a year or two. But ever since Nivelet's release in Fontaine, Genshin completely threw the balancing out of the window. He was by far the strongest unit in the game, but his reign only lasted for 6 patches because then Arlecchino was released and she was by far the best DPS in the game. But then, her reign only lasted for 3 patches because then they released Mulaney, which was by far the strongest unit in the game. But guess what? Then she only lasted for 2 patches because now they just released Chaska and she is by far the strongest unit in the game. The problem is not that Mauvika is a DPS, the problem is that Mauvika is a DPS in the current state of Genshin Impact. Where probably in a patch, or if she is lucky in 2 patches, there will be another unit that deals more damage than Mauvika, easier than her. And when it comes to dealing pyro damage off field, I mean, Xianling is already miles better than her actually. Only way for a character to last in Genshin is by being a support or off field, and Mauvika is an underwhelming support and actually kinda bad off fielder. The Archon out of all characters is the character that most hyped and usually most wanted by the huge portion of the player base. And Mauvika being basically dead on arrival is not good news for any of us, guys. Now actually I had the script I wrote in 5.1 where I kinda thought of what would be a proper Pyro Archon kit that would be acceptable by everyone, but without straight up breaking the game. But I could never get around making that video because of my busy life, so I will use this rant video to slightly touch on what I would like to see from Mauvika. Now I thought Mauvika's skill similar to Nahida's skill. She would automatically mark enemies nearby, and when you trigger pyro related reactions on enemies, it would explode in intervals, applying pyro. Then I thought of her burst similar to Yelan or Shincho's burst, but with 2 tiers. So after using her burst within 3 or 4 seconds, depending on how many Night Soul skills you use in the team, her burst would either function in tier 1 or tier 2. On tier 1 she would apply less pyro, but her own personal damage would be really high, like really good for Mulaney or Kinich or maybe some upcoming other Netland characters that would want a pyro off-fielder. But at tier 2, she would apply so much more pyro, maybe on the limits of what could be considered broken actually, but for exchange, she would deal so much less damage. So that way, older units who would like a really high pyro application would enjoy Mauvika's existence, because currently her pyro application is so bad, no old unit would actually make any use of her at all. Of course, my script was more in detail with ICD and units of pyro per attack she applies, but I won't bore you with all that because this is a rant video after all. But the point is, that's basically how easy and simple it would be to make a Mauvika kit that I believe would make everyone happy. If you want, you can throw some main DPS passive or Constellation infusion if you want, but what we all wanted from her base kit was for her to apply off-field pyro. So we can finally stop playing Xianling, because let me tell you guys, I fucking hate Xianling. I fucking hate playing Xianling. I hate her cooldowns, I hate her energy requirement. I hate that every time I play Xianling, I also have to play Bennett because I have to, use Bennett's skill and then switch to Xianling and get those particles because if I don't use Bennett, Xianling will not have enough energy to use her burst in the next rotation. I'm tired of Bennett and Xianling combo, guys. I just want a character to replace Xianling, and that was basically the feeling of most of the people in the community. And I don't know who let Genshin devs cook, but let me tell you guys, they definitely burnt it with Mauvika this time.